It's a great question. The question is, thank you so much for that question, because it's something I write about in a couple of chapters in the book, and that is what occurred when the prisoners of war, 4,000 British and Hessian, came here nearby to the Albemarle barracks. And it was the people of Massachusetts who said, we don't want these prisoners here. We're concerned that if they're here, the British will too easily come to Boston and capture them, and it would be a dramatic turning point in the war. So it was decided that they had to move them. And in Virginia, local people wrote and said, we'd like to have them here. Jefferson was very supportive of this idea. In fact, he felt that this was so safe that there was no chance that the British would ever come to as far as Charlottesville. It was simply not in his imagination. And if by some chance they did come to Charlottesville, surely the local men along the way would stop them. So you can see how deeply he believed that this would be a safe place even in the worst of times. So as the prison camp was built right near here, Jefferson was very pleased. Some people, however, said it was not a good idea and tried to move them again. And Jefferson wrote a letter to Patrick Henry, then the governor of Virginia, saying, no, they should remain here. And he noted, just like a congressman of today, that they were contributing to the local economy. $30,000 a week, he said. And not only that, but there were some fine craftsmen who could help at Monticello and nearby plantations. And yes, he believed in honor among officers, so he had other officers put up at Blenheim, at the various places nearby here, so that they would have sort of an equal residence. And he felt that, yes, he could bring them to Monticello. As I said earlier, Jefferson believed that music was the passion of his soul, and he found that some of the German officers in particular were fine violinists. So he had them come to Monticello to his parlor where he played duets, and also Martha, Jefferson's wife, joined them on the harpsichord. And with some of these officers, Jefferson maintained relations throughout his life. One particular officer, William Phillips, who you may have heard of, the British officer whom Jefferson entertained here, later was traded in a prisoner of war swap. And he later was one of the ones who led a follow-up invasion to Arnold. So Arnold's here, and then William Phillips leads a great force. And Phillips and Arnold had been on opposite sides during Saratoga. And yet here, Arnold's on the same side, comes aboard Phillips' ship, and they decide what to do to conquer Virginia. And I thought it was just a very dramatic scene, gives you a big sense of what's happening in Virginia and what an important part these key players are playing. And Jefferson hears not only that his former compatriot Arnold is leading the invasion, but the person he entertained at Monticello is leading another invasion force into Virginia. So you can only imagine what's going through his mind at this point. So all these events do turn around, and he does eventually come to see that perhaps it wasn't a great idea to have the prisoner of war camp here near Charlottesville and to be so close to these officers who later felt that they knew Virginia so very well for having been prisoners here. Other questions?
So to follow up on that point, and I remember you're covering it, and I can't remember this fine point, but wasn't it Jefferson who also made sure that camp was no longer there by the time the British?
Right.
It would have been disastrous had they gotten to Charlottesville and been able to free 4,000 prisoners.
Right. The question was, didn't Jefferson himself eventually order the prisoners out? He did eventually do that. It took a lot of urging by other people to get him to do this. But as invasion fleets came up, the prior invasion fleet, he finally said that we need to get these men further north, and a lot of them went to Maryland, for example. So he did do that, but it took quite a while. It took quite a long time for him to decide that. Very fortunate. Can you imagine if Tarleton comes here and there's a prisoner of war camp with 4,000 men? In fact, there were some stragglers, some prisoners who, for whatever reason, have been able to hang around. And Jefferson didn't feel it was quite as important to get all the Hessian prisoners out. He didn't feel that they were quite as apt to turn around again. But there were some stragglers, according to a letter by one of the Hessian officers that I read, and so they may have joined with Tarleton, but there were some left, but it would have been a disaster had the camp still remained.